Hi everyone, this is Piyush Ranjan. I am the founder of Management Masters. We are a boutique admissions consulting firm for the top MBA programs around the world. And today I have with me in this webinar three amazing candidates who worked with us, who have gone on for their MBAs. Some of them have graduated from their MBA program, some are still in the MBA program. And we wanted to do this session to sort of bring to you a very real experience of what an MBA program is about. How can it actually affect your life? How can it actually change your life? Because for all these three people, MBA has been a very major sort of milestone of their career so far. And I believe if you are watching this, you're also thinking of an MBA as a potential milestone in your careers. So let's start with a very quick round of introduction. Let's start with Kashish because Kashish has just recently graduated from HEC Paris. Hi, Kashish. Could you tell us a bit about what you are doing now? When did you graduate? And just a bit of an introduction for yourself.
Sure. Hi, I'm Kashish, and very happy to be here. Well, I graduated from HEC Paris. It's not very recent because I graduated last year, and I don't realize how it's already been 1 year. But yeah, I graduated from HEC Paris. I was a part of the January 22 intake, and now I am working at Amazon as a senior program manager in Munich, which is also very new for me right now because I've just recently started. Before that, I worked as a consultant at KPMG for about 4.5 years before I went for my MBA, and been quite a shift from everything, location and job and everything. But yeah, very happy to be where I am and for the decisions that I took.
Right. Thank you, Kashish, so much for that. Let's go to Disha next. Disha, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, Piyush. Thank you for having us and thank you for doing this webinar. I am in my second year at Kellogg right now. I'm graduating in 2 months. Before Kellogg, I did my first MBA from NMIMS Mumbai, as has been said in all of your posts. After that, I did investment banking at JP Morgan for 4 years. Um, Over the past year in the summer, I was doing consulting at Alex Partners during my internship, and I have an offer from them after Kellogg, which I'm going to join. Excited to have this conversation, discussion. Over to you.
Absolutely. Equally excited. And let's go to our final participant, Anjika.
Perfect. Hi, Piyush. Thanks for having us. It's always a pleasure to meet everyone here. I'm Anjika. I just finished my first year at Wharton, and I'm going into my second year starting September. I have a summer break, so going back to India before I start my second year at Wharton. Prior to joining business school, I was working for a period of 8 years in advertising technology at media.net. And my work spanned various different functional areas. I worked across business development, program management, and tech strategy. But Wharton has been a very fulfilling journey, so and would love to talk more as we walk through today. And for the summer, I'm hoping to join a consulting firm and let's see how that pivot works out for me.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that, Anjika. And thank you all of you. Before we sort of move into the discussion, before we move into the more detailed areas of our discussion today, I will urge all the viewers to feel free to ask questions, feel free to share your questions in the chat box. We will take up Q&As towards the end of the session. So feel free to sort of share your questions and ask anything that you would want to ask the candidates or me or anything about MBA programs or application journeys or admissions in general. Now, let's start with a very quick question, right? So all three of you, you had very different journeys, right? You all ended up at top MBA programs, but the journey that you had and the challenges that you faced, they were very significantly different from each other, right? So could you tell us a bit about what were the biggest concerns that you had when you were applying, and what did you do to be able to come out of those concerns or to address those concerns through your applications, right? Maybe we start with Anjika.
Absolutely. I think like one of the top challenges that comes to mind, and as you've always mentioned, Piyush, is that I did have 8 years of work experience when I was applying, when I'd be joining my MBA. So 7.5 when I was applying. And if we look at the average like work experience that MBAs usually have, it's around the 4 or 5 year mark, especially within the States. So I was definitely on the higher end of that spectrum. I felt that it would be important for me to cover this aspect while applying because it was something that was beyond the averages. So I think that was one definite factor that I had to work on. I'll first talk about the challenges and then probably delve into how I try to work best with them. The second thing was the non-traditional work experience. So advertising technology, like till today, people ask me what is the technology aspect within the advertising. So it was a very niche space, and I had only been in a single industry for 8 years. So I think usually if you look at like some of the common work experiences that people share at the MBA, it's usually consulting, investment banking, or product management. So I came in from different functional areas, but a non-traditional industry for sure. And lastly, I would say it was also the GMAT for the schools and the programs that I was targeting. I had a 730 GMAT, which again was just at the average GMAT score for a lot of these programs. So I think these were three important challenges that I faced during my application journey. And maybe the way to solve them was just being more intentional about all of the steps in your application journey. For example, making sure you're doing the right level of research when you're applying to these programs, working with you to make sure my essays are well crafted and more detailed to highlight why an MBA makes sense for me at this stage of my career journey and what am I looking to gain out of the MBA program. So I did delve upon the fact that it's the broader industry exposure that I'm definitely looking to gain and how an MBA will allow me to do that. So I think these were some of the aspects that I tried to definitely leverage. And apart from that, leveraging some of the resources to get the right guidance. For example, I've spoken to Kashish and Disha right here to get, since one of them was already in the program and Disha was in her first year when I was speaking to her. So it was great to get their perspective, to get like a first-hand perspective on their experiences, what I can bring from their journey and apply that to my experience. So I think it was very important to customize my application, keeping these considerations in mind.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Anjika. Disha, what do you think were the biggest concerns for you since you were going for a second MBA, and I've mentioned that multiple times now. But did that give you any specific concerns that you were, worried about your applications, or you wanted to sort of really keep in check while you're applying?
Yeah, I think that was the main concern, and it's not
Very,
just, yeah.
yeah, I'm sorry, there has been a power cut. It should be back in 2 minutes, but please feel free to continue.
Yeah, so first issue was not all schools accept a second MBA. So filtering those out was the first step in itself. And that meant that I had like a limited number of schools that I could apply to. And also, this is not advertised anywhere, right? Like which schools accept second MBAs, which don't. So I had to literally reach out to all the admissions committees and figure that out for myself. And after I figured out that, okay, these schools are going to accept, also the next step of how do I position the fact that I'm going for a second MBA. I think in some of the schools in the US, it is pretty common to find Indian MBAs who are second year MBAs. But I will talk specifically about Kellogg. Most of the Indian MBAs do the 1Y program because it's shorter and it makes sense for them. Whereas I had decided that no, I do want to do the 2Y. And how to position that. So similar to what Anjika said, you really helped me craft that and come up with like a reason as to why it does make sense. I think what we finally settled on was, well, the first MBA kind of acted as a pivot into finance. It was more like a quote unquote master's in finance for me professionally. And so that helped me really go into the fact that, okay, this MBA is going to be broadening what I can do after MBA as opposed to my first one. And the second was like Anjika mentioned, the GMAT itself. When we first started talking, you were very adamant on the fact that we will not start applications till we have that final score, because I was in the process of doing retakes. And I think that really helped because once you do have that final score, you're more set in stone as to which schools you can apply to, which schools seem realistic, and sort of craft your application process and in that manner, as opposed to going back and forth. Okay, maybe I should do this or that.
Thank you so much for that. Uh, Kashish, coming to you, you had a pretty unique sort of work profile, right? As well as you're applying with just 3 years of experience. So how did these things factor into your applications?
Right. I think definitely those were two very important things, but I think something that sort of also made the year that I applied in more difficult was that it was the COVID year. And it was probably one of the worst years to apply in. And I've also graduated at a very bad time. So I should have probably consulted an astrologer before I did my MBA. But having said that, the fact that it was a COVID year and the fact that the number of applications across every school was so high made your application or your candidature even more challenging. So things such as having an okayish GMAT for an Indian candidate, or I think lower than average work experience for most schools, did not really help that much. And another concern that I had about my experience was that it was too specific, too specialized in one thing. So how do I sort of explain how I'm going to use that experience to transition into the career that I want, not just in my application, but also in my interview for say HEC, was also something that for me at least was a concern. But I think, I mean, of course, there were things out of this that I couldn't control, such as my GMAT score. I was not going to take it again. Or the fact that I was applying in the COVID year. I mean, those things were beyond my control. But things such as, say, a lower than average work experience, or how I'm going to use my specialized work experience in the particular field that I was in to transition to a more generalized sort of career, were the two things that I specifically worked on. And I think one thing that I did was make my application very simple instead of making it very technical and very like jargony about it's especially my resume as well, like very jargony about what I'm doing, and it wasn't really the best thing to show off. So I kind of made it very simple so that anybody could understand it. And the second thing that I did was speak to a lot of people. Like, when I say a lot, I really mean a lot of people, because I had examples of conversations to quote for literally everything that I said in my application or during my interviews. And I think in my interview, I received a lot of pushback in terms of how are you going to transition to a career, in the career that you want to. And I had like at least 4 or 5 examples to give that, I've spoken to this person who's in this geography, who's also an Indian. So that I think definitely helped me to show that I've done my research, I've done my homework, and I'm not just, bullshitting, which we do a lot in the MBA otherwise. But yeah, I mean, I think those things definitely helped. And yeah, I think just getting confidence that the lower than average work experience wouldn't be a problem, at least from the HEC marketing team, was also another thing which sort of helped. So always speak to the AdCom, always speak to alumni to get a better sense check of what the on ground reality is, and then play your cards according to
I
that.
want to build upon this a little bit, right? You've brought on a very important point, and I think you also mentioned that the three of you have, through the application journey, kind of you have interacted with each other to sort of help each other out, right? And this is a very common question that we get from a lot of candidates, as to everybody says that you need to talk to alumni and students, and you need when you're doing your research. But why is it important, and what do you really gain from it, right? So if you could sort of just touch upon that from your perspective, I think that would be great.
Right. I'm going to say this in a very simple manner, okay? If you probably see the website, if you see the advertisement for any product, if I'm a company, I'm not going to say, hey, beware of using my product, because my product may or may not work for you. If I'm a company, I'm always going to say, hey, listen, this is the product you need for the rest of your life. So I don't think any company is going to come forward and say that my product is average and you may not get the best results. But then the people who should, or at least would be better equipped to tell you about what really goes on in that journey, are the people who've been through it, who've been using that product, and who can tell you that, hey, I did this, and this is what worked for me, and this is what did not work for me. So I think in that perspective, I feel like connecting with not just alumni, but people who are even currently studying there is a very, very useful resource. Not just to give examples in your application or in your interview, but to genuinely understand the decision that you're making, and if that decision is going to make sense for you or not make sense for you, and
Right.
just to sort of match your expectations before you even take that decision. Because like I can just say from experience that from application to the MBA to post MBA, I have three very different perspectives. So if you would have spoken to me in any of those phases of my life in the last 3 years, my answers might be different. So I
Right.
think it's you just listen from the horse's mouth, I guess, and that's the people
Right.
who have done the MBA.
Right. 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 Makes a lot of sense. Anything that you would want to add, Disha or Anjika, to this?
I just want to say Kashish is talking about the Amazon reviews of MBA. I love that.
Right. So get a more realistic picture of what goes on, right? Apart from that, anything else that you think really adds value when you talk to people, when you reach out to students, alums?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd love to add here is that the way you do it is also important, because I've seen a lot of candidates who are wishing to apply for the next year. They just use the same template and they apply it to everybody, which seems very non-personalized and sometimes even non-intentional. It just feels like they're trying to tick the box. So I think it's extremely important that you're looking at it from an information gathering, perspective gathering phase, where you're trying to understand whether the school and the program are a right fit for you. So try to find commonalities. For example, someone who's gone to the same school, someone who has probably made the transition from a non-traditional career to the career that you're hoping to make as well. So I think finding those commonalities and connecting on those points can be a great strategy for candidates who are looking to connect to these resources, assuming you don't already have friends or family over there. So I think that's an important strategy that we all tend to miss out. And I think one second thing I would also like to add is, I mean, for me, I used to get very overwhelmed by like talking to 20 or 30 people, because I felt it could be a lot sometimes. So do what works best for you. Like for me, it was the quality of the connections as opposed to the quantity, but for somebody else, it may be vice versa. So try to understand what works for you. What are you looking to gain from that particular conversation? Keep it concise, but hope to make the most of it from your personal perspective.
Right. Thank you so much for that. Anything that you want to add, Disha?
No, I echo everything that Kashish and Anjika said.
Right.
I just want to add specifically when you do these phone calls where you speak to alumni or folks who are in the MBA, try to show that you're researched and have specific questions as opposed to, oh, how is your experience and how is everything going? Because it does help with quoting in applications, like Kashish mentioned, but it also shows to the person that you do know something about it already, because there are resources, the websites are telling you everything. It's not like you're starting from scratch.
Yep.
And now you want to know the lived experience of that particular thing. So
Yep.
it does like sound like, oh, you are really interested in the school, and they would be more enthusiastic to have that conversation.
Yep. No, absolutely makes sense. When you reach out to somebody who can give you more information, there needs to be a basis or a base information level that you already need to have. So that absolutely makes sense. Thank you so much for that. Now, if let's say at this point of time, right, it's in we are towards the end of April, we are right in May almost, and there's like 4 or 5 months to the first round applications. What would your suggestions be for the candidates? What could they do, uh, you know, in terms of building their applications, which can help them get, the best possible results that they might have? So maybe let's start with Disha this time, and maybe
Yeah,
just one tip from each of you, because I think then a lot of things they will get common at the end of the day, right?
yeah. I'm gonna take a out of your book, Piyush, and talk about how some things are set in stone already at this point, and acceptance is better. So try not to do like huge things that you're trying to scramble and add to your profile at the last minute. I think finalizing the GMAT score at this point is very important because of the reasons that I spoke about already. And then just kind of thinking about what will be your strategy as to which schools you want to apply for sort of based on rankings or based on what are your post MBA goals. So thinking about that at this point. Yeah.
Right. Perfect. Makes a lot of sense. Let's go to Anjika, and then we come to Kashish.
Yeah. I think definitely like having your GMAT early on definitely helps and you can plan better. I think leaving enough time for each school application is one thing that I see is a common mistake that a lot of us make. So it's important to have, like, for example, there are certain candidates who want to apply to maybe just 3 or 4 schools. They have a very targeted approach. Whereas on other end of the spectrum, where, like, for example, for me, I applied to 3 different geographical areas as well because I was open to the US, India, or London. So having that clarity early on and knowing that, like, having that headstrong approach when you're in the application phase is important because there's a lot of noise when you're actually getting more perspective, doing your own research. So having that clarity going in allows you to have that strong application driven approach when you're applying, and then just backing that up with leaving enough time for each of the applications, because if you do want to apply to a larger number of schools than average, then it means that having carved out time, like good enough time for each of these individual applications, I think that would be one definite thing to keep in mind.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. So being very structured and sort of ensuring that you're spending enough time on the applications, I think.
Absolutely.
I
If
think
you can't find that structure yourself, then hire somebody to help you structure. So, I mean, for me, I definitely need some guidance when it comes to structuring. So, the 8-step process was super helpful because it kept me on track. So, I mean, see what works for you best, and then definitely try to apply that and do it in a more structured and time-oriented manner.
Right. Anything that you would want to add on, Kashish, to this?
Yeah, like just a bit different would be that I think 4 or 5 months before, there isn't much that you can honestly add in your profile or add something that might hold a lot of relevance apart from the GMAT. But if you're brave enough to take the GMAT along with your application, along with preparing for your applications, great, do that. But apart from that, I think one thing that's going to be super important is researching about the schools. And I don't mean just like talking to different people. You have to literally start from scratch about, like, okay, do I want to do a 1-year program or a 2-year program? What geography do I want to go to? Am I location agnostic or not? Do I want to do a specialization or do I want to do like a capstone project? Because every school does not offer that. Do I feel more comfortable in a case study environment or in a different sort of study method? Because again, different schools have different teaching methods. And just from my personal experience, I felt that took a lot of time in just attending, I don't know how many different events and webinars and speaking to people and going through brochures. Like, I remember I had this extensive Excel at one point in time in which I had
I
noted.
remember that Excel.
Yeah, I had clubs, events, quotes from like news. Like, I don't know, I had everything. So I think, and that I think is super important because you cannot apply everywhere and you also cannot apply to all colleges in one round. So that research will literally form your baseline of understanding where do you want to apply and what do you want to prioritize, like which schools you want to prioritize for R1 and or leave them later for R2, or even which schools you should apply earlier. For example, HEC has a rolling deadline versus other schools for which the R1 deadline is probably end of October. So then, if you don't know that information, you can't make your decisions.
Yep.
So just, I mean, get the facts right, I guess. Yeah.
Makes a lot of sense. And just to sort of follow up on this, what would you say, now that you've been through the process and probably you've seen a lot of candidates coming as well, right? They would be asking questions, they would be sort of reaching out to you guys. What do you see as, the most common mistakes or the biggest mistakes that people make when it comes to building applications or, in the application journey? Maybe let's start with Kashish.
most common mistakes, I think I think I'd link it to what I already said. And I think one of the mistakes that I've definitely seen in people is I'll talk about two. One, that they don't know enough about the school. I mean, they don't. I have honestly gone through several essays. I've spoken to several people. I've also interviewed a few candidates now. And I have sort of noticed that they don't offer me something which any other candidate might not be offering in the essay. Like if it's HEC and if you don't talk about MBAD, that's almost like, hey, everybody wants to be a part of MBAD. But then there has to be something beyond that.
Hmm.
So I think one thing would be definitely offering something or linking something very specific to the school itself to genuinely show your interest for the school, even if you don't want to go there. So how do you sell yourself? And B, I feel candidates sometimes do not exhibit their strengths very well. And you might not always get an opportunity to interview. So, right at the application stage, just by the way of your words, it is very important that you exhibit your personality and your strengths very well. A
Right.
lot of times, I feel like I don't feel excited by reading these essays. So, that is, I think, a skill that comes when you're working on your applications, which is why working with consultants can also help. But I think those are two things that at least I
Right.
have
Makes
faced.
makes a lot of
Come.
sense. So just to, if I summarize that, essentially one obviously is make sure that you're talking about your strengths, and the second thing is when you're doing that research, right, that you mentioned earlier, go beyond the obvious stuff, right? Don't
Yeah.
talk about the most generic stuff, the first thing that you find about the school. Uh, Absolutely, you can talk about it, but then go into the details, show them that you've really done your research and you know what you're talking about. Right, that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense. Disha, what would you say, what you have seen uh, regarding the mistakes?
Completely agree with Kashish on this one. I will add that I think for some of us, it is hard to show the pivot from what we are doing to what we want to do. So, for example, for me, I think in one of the interviews, I had a hard time convincing the interviewer that my post MBA goals are A, realistic, and B, that they made sense with my profile. So that is something that can be hard to like first figure it out yourself and then also be convincing enough for the school. And Piyush, I think we talked about this extensively. We were always like, oh, what is that one pivot that's going to be, in the sense that it should connect with your existing work experience, it should be achievable, it should be really what you want to do. So, yeah, I think that is the main one for me.
Right, makes a lot of sense. Makes a lot of sense. Anjika, anything that you would want to add to this?
Yeah, I think maybe two quick things. One is I think using generic essays for all your school applications. I think that is a big no, and that's pretty much tying into what Kashish and Disha said. It has to be extremely customized, very intentional about your specific reasons, because the school wants to see why are you choosing their program over anything else in the world. So show that genuine interest in that specific school's program, curriculum, content, and there's a lot of information available on the website. So spend that time doing that research. And I think the second thing I would say is that because all of the application factors are within our control, a lot of us tend to forget the recommendation aspect. And there is a notion that you all have to get the recommendation from the most senior person in the company. If it's not from your CEO, then it may not be the most valuable thing. But I think that's something that I'd like to break, is that it's more important for that person. Of course, they should have worked with you in a professional capacity, 100%. But that being said, it's more important for them to have a more close eye on your work experience and what you've done in your like whatever work that you were doing prior to your MBA, because they're looking for some nuances on how you behave in certain kind of settings in a teamwork situation. How are you as a leader? And they're able to see that from somebody who genuinely knows more about you, as opposed to somebody who's a CEO but has never worked with you in personal capacity. So I think
Right.
choose your recommenders wisely, and at the same time leave enough time for them to fill out a wholehearted application for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, makes a lot of sense. And I think this is great that you brought out about the recommendations. I think a lot of people fall into the trap of trying to find the highest designation that can refer them. right? And then that's great. Now, one very controversial question for all of you, probably. How was your MBA experience? Did it live up to your expectations? Did it live up to what you expected out of it? Uh, and I leave the floor open. Whoever wants to take this question first.
Yeah, I mean, I can start. I'm still in my first year. A lot of perspectives yet to be developed.
Right,
So
absolutely.
so for me, honestly, I mean, I think main two reasons were to have a more diverse, like community in terms of the perspectives that I have, and to make like an industry switch because I only had a single industry experience. And I think both of those are very much possible within the realm of like the experience that I've had so far. The classrooms are indeed very, very diverse, and like the class participation is like, I think it's very equally balanced between professor content as well as student driven content. The idea is to make sure you're hearing perspectives from people who've done some amazing work prior to coming to business school. So I think that's definitely been an add for me where I actually learn from the diverse experiences of the people in the classroom. And you're put into, like for us, we're put into certain learning teams of 6 people with completely different backgrounds and perspectives. And you're made to work on certain projects, certain simulations. And that allows you to see how a person who would act like in finance have this perspective on a particular marketing related project. So I think it's a great learning addition in that regard. And also from an industry perspective, of course, given the situation of the economy, there's a lot to be said over there. But at the same time, the MBA does provide you a lot of resources to make that career switch happen. And of course, it does come with the challenges, but there are courses, there are pathways that you can take that allow you to make that transition possible. It's a lot of proactive approach versus a reactive approach, I would say,
Yeah.
but it's something that's definitely possible. So took me time to adjust to the United States, but it's been a fulfilling journey so far and excited for the year to come.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. Who wants to go next?
I can
Yeah,
go. I think
absolutely.
I've had some experience graduating as well, so maybe I can take
Yeah.
that. I think for me, how I categorize it as is probably into three buckets, and one is personal, one is say professional, of course, and one is I would say academic, because at the end of the day, you're doing a master's degree, right? So in terms of personal, I think a lot of people don't sort of place enough importance in how MBA is as much a personal journey as it is a professional journey. So in terms of personal growth, I think it's been immense. It was probably very expensive therapy for 16 months, but it's immense, like personal trajectory and immense difference in the person I was and the person I am now. And again, like amazing personal experience with the people on campus and exactly what I wanted, exactly what is advertised by HEC in terms of its community, and exactly what I got. I'm not even mincing my words. The more I speak to people from other colleges in India, in the US, in the UK, I feel very glad that I went to HEC and not the other colleges,
Could you
simply because.
elaborate a bit? Why do you say that?
Yes, and I wouldn't name colleges, but
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah, I wouldn't name the other colleges, but definitely what I've realized that the community at HEC is much, much more collaborative. The perspective that you get amongst, it's not just about being an international cohort, it's also about the personality that that cohort is bringing. Because you have a lot of other international cohorts, but then what drives them is very different from what drives people at HEC. And I think they do some remarkable job in admitting people who have a particular drive over another particular drive. I don't know how
Right.
they do it, but that's something I've seen consistently. So, talking about jobs, talking about like, it was never a differentiation. I never felt lesser than anyone because I didn't have a particular job or I wasn't doing it. I didn't intern in the summer, but I never felt like, oh my God, I've committed a crime. But at
Right.
a lot of other places, you do feel that pressure of not having a stellar, you know, thing on your
Right.
resume or whatever. At HEC, you don't. So, in terms of, yes, personal, very, very satisfied. Professional, very satisfied with the outcome. Definitely very, very satisfied with the outcome. But I had a lot of expectation setting when I went to HEC in terms of the geography that I am operating in, which is Europe. and in terms of how realistic things may or may not be, which
Mm.
I, despite my extensive research, did not know before before I experienced it myself. So professional, I'm, yes, very satisfied with the outcome, but the journey till getting there is very, very challenging and not easy, uh, and has a lot of breakdowns involved. Um, and in terms of academic, well, here for me, it was a mixed thing for academics because I loved some of the academic things, but in some cases, I felt like I wanted more, or personally, I
Mm.
could have extracted more out of it. I just didn't prioritize the academics as much as maybe some other people did. So I definitely feel I don't know how educated I am despite having a master's degree, but yeah, academic
I,
could
I,
be a hit or miss.
I think with an MBA, it's safe to say that almost everybody would feel similar, right?
I
With the
don't know.
amount of
I can talk
with the
about
amount of
myself.
partying that goes on, right? I think it's safe to say that. But anyway, let's come to Disha. Disha, how has been your experience? You're about to graduate,
Yeah.
and so how has
In
been
that
your 2 years
phase,
at Kellogg?
I'm in that phase where everyone's asking me the same question. So um, I really liked some of the things that Anjika and Kashish said. Um, I want to add a little bit on the professional side as well as on the moving to a new country side. So, on the professional side, yes, our batch, the 2024 batch, had sort of a rough time last year as well as are having a rough time this year. But kudos to the Kellogg Professional Network. So, I will just take like one example from my summer recruiting last year. I was recruiting for consulting, but I was doing like a plan B recruiting as well because the plan A was not going very well. So I was recruiting for corporate finance and some of these companies that come to the school. I couldn't find anyone from my second year who had gone there, and I don't know. I didn't know what to expect in the interview because it wasn't like a networking led, like it wasn't like I did networking and that led to the interview. It was just like a resume pick. So I cold reached out on LinkedIn to Kellogg alum who were in some of these jobs, probably had graduated 2 3 years ago, and I was able to talk to them in the next like 1 or 2 days just to know what I could expect in the interview, and ended up cracking the interviews. So that was like I didn't expect that, and just the fact that it says Kellogg on LinkedIn and people respond because of that kind of showed me a version of what the professional network looks like. Outside of that, in my summer internship as well, there were Kellogg folks in my consulting company, and they were always kind of looking out for me in the context of is everything going well? What, like, trying to provide extra mentorship over and above what I was receiving. So that forms kind of the basis of the fact that if you are in a school where the professional network and the camaraderie is such that people want to look out for each other, people have that paid forward attitude, then even when times are rough, you will find something.
Right.
Second is about making the international move. So I have lived in Canada before for like a few months, worked there, but this was truly the first time that I left India. And US is a very peculiar place where if you move just with jobs, it can be very lonely, it can be rough to sort of integrate. But I always call MBA like a soft landing. It provides you with all this friend circle. And to to Anjika's point on diversity, yes, you get all of this diversity that you get to talk to new folks, but then you also have the comfort of, well, your Indian community is still here. If you feel that you are not like in a place to have all these like new experiences 100% of the time, a lot of the time you have these folks in your corner. And so that's why it's easier to sort of flow into the life of what your new US life is going
Right.
to look like. And these are, I think, points not usually talked about in an MBA context. And I'm sure I missed like some of the traditional facts that people
No, it's
talk, but I
absolutely great because this is something which is very you don't, as you said, you won't get these insights if I was not talking to you, if we were not having this conversation, we would not hear this in general, right? And these are very important aspects of going for an MBA because you're completely rooting your life from one place to the other, right? Whether it's Paris, whether it's Kellogg, whether it's Wharton, you know, you are completely uprooting yourself from one place, moving to a completely different country where people might not even understand your accent at times, right? So these are very, very important points, and thank you for bringing them up. I want to catch on to one of the aspects which is very important and very much in vogue at this point of time, that MBA programs are absolute, worthless because nobody's finding a job, right? And we've had a lot of candidates who've come to us and asked us, is it worth going for an MBA at this point of time? Because there's recession, there is, companies are not hiring. You keep hearing these news. What is your take on, how to approach? Should somebody be looking for an MBA at this point of time, or what could be other options that they might have, or that they might sort of want to, explore at this point of time? Anyone, like, feel free to sort of answer, because all three of you have faced issues with this, right, with the current scope.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. Go ahead, Disha.
I think, as I alluded to, it was a rough time recruiting for summers last year, as well as going into full time this year. But the fact that you have to be very clear on what is it that you are going into it while you're applying. What is it that you want? Are you just wanting a job out of the MBA? Are you looking for personality development, professional development? Are you looking for the three pivots that we talk about in MBA? Not finding the job that you wanted to in the beginning could be like one part of the three, but the other two still exist, right? You still sort of are able to go into a new industry or a new function, and you have definitely changed geography. So I would say that think about the fact that, are you going to change as a person? Do you approach things differently after the MBA? If that is true, the MBA has paid off in a certain way. Coming to whether it makes sense to apply in a recession or not, most folks say that it's best to apply in recession, so you write it out. That's one aspect. But the second aspect is having a plan B, plan C during recruiting, and managing expectations is super important. So based on that, whether you want to go to a really good school that may not offer scholarships and you're okay with that risk, or you want to go to a medium tier school where you get a lot of scholarships and you have reduced your risk a little bit. A lot of the research that you do in the beginning, some of what Kashish talked about, like what can you expect there? I think that research is going to help you answer some of those questions.
Right. Anjika, anything that you wanted to add to this? And since you've been recruiting for internships, you had a rough patch as well, right? So what would you say?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think first thing is definitely expectation setting. Like when we all join some of these schools, we come in with very high expectations that, okay, now we don't have to do any of the work. The school will do the work for us. I think it's important for us to break that notion, because here you're also everyone across all these top 20 schools is applying for an internship or a full-time job at the same amount of time. And as an international candidate, it becomes even more important to kind of consider the visa aspect in the US and maybe other aspects in Europe as well. So I think overall, I would say expectation setting is important, because I want to reiterate that it has to be a proactive approach as opposed to a reactive approach. And the reason I say that is because a lot of us had career centers back in schools in India, and we are used to them just having campus placements and getting cleared in 1 or 2 weeks and then being happy about it. But here the process is very different, and it's important to have that awareness coming in that you still have to do the work. You still have to build those connections like you did for your MBA. You build those connections for your future internship or job, and have an intentional approach to doing the work on an extended timeline as opposed to just getting done in 2 weeks, because here the career center is helping you get what you want to get out of them and not the opposite, as very something we're very used to. So that's an extremely important aspect, and if you do put in the work, it's something that does pay off. It's probably spread out in terms of the time horizon, but it does allow you. I think the MBA offers a lot of resources in terms of like the networking opportunities. There are like career centers, and the level of experience and support that they bring to the table is something that you may not be able to leverage elsewhere. And like just coming back to your point, Piyush, whether if people are considering whether they should do it in a recession or not, another perspective I encourage them to take is a short term versus a long term perspective. And the reason I say that is that we all look at it from a very 2 or 3 year lens. What is the immediate job that I'm going to get after the MBA? It's honestly sometimes not about that. It's about in your career journey, combining your personal and professional aspirations. If this is the right time for you to do it, then maybe consider that and look at the long-term value of the MBA and not just what is the next immediate job, because the market is going to fluctuate at a lot of points in time, but it's what you put into it and that's what you get out of it. So I think that's an important lens to add as well.
Right. Makes a lot of sense, and thanks for sharing that. The very interesting thing for me here is, right, the three of you have gone on to some of the best possible schools in the world, right? You two are in the best possible schools in the US. Kashish will come to you as well, but you've been in the best possible school in Europe, and still you have faced these challenges, right? And that comes to Anjika's point very clearly, that just because you have been there, just because you have reached a particular school, it's not going to take away the risks that you are undertaking with the MBA program, and everything will come with certain level of risk, right? So this is very I think a very realistic and a pragmatic sort of picture, which very often candidates miss when they are applying. They feel M7 ho gaya and absolutely fine, now you're like set for life, but you realize once you go there that you still need to continue that same effort, right, to get the kind of result. So sorry for interrupting you, Kashish. Now let's come to you. How is what is going to be your suggestion? What is your perspective in this regard?
Um, I think this is a very difficult and subjective question because, like, I can just relate it to my own personal situation, which is because I applied in COVID, thinking by the time I graduate or even go for my MBA, COVID will be history and like it'll all be nice. And here we are, right? So I think my point is you don't know what's going to happen in the future. You don't know if, say, next year US or UK or any country comes and say, hey, now we're not giving out visas or we're reducing the time that you have after your MBA to get jobs. I mean, these are things that are beyond your control and you don't know about them. So no point thinking about it, I guess. What's more important is understanding what is it that you want out of an MBA. And I think obviously switching careers is one of the biggest things that all of us sort of look for, that we want to switch our careers and we want to probably be in a different geography. So if that is the thing that you're looking at, and sort of work backwards from it and understand that if that's your end goal, are there other ways to reach that goal other than an MBA? Maybe you can do like a specialized master's. Maybe you can transition within your job and reach that goal, because there are people who do. For all of these cases, there are people who do. MBA is not the ultimate truth.
Yep.
But then if you think that none of those other things might work and you still really want to do an MBA because you see the value add that it'll have in your life, not just now but say for the next 10-15 years, because it is truly something that will stay with you for the rest of your lives, then I mean you take a plunge and you go ahead and you do it, and you sort of figure it out along as you go. So yes, it's right that you have backups, that you have alternate plan of actions. Something very small that I did was not take a loan from Prodigy and instead take it from an Indian bank, just to account for the risk that I might have if I don't have a job at the end of the MBA.
You were a risk consultant anyway, right?
I mean, yeah. And I'm also very risk averse as a person. But what I can tell you, uncertainty will never go out of your lives, because you can join a job, and I'm pretty sure all of us know people are getting fired after joining jobs, right? After being from XYZ colleges. What do you do then? Do you like give up? No, right?
Right.
You figure it out along the way as things are thrown in your face. And I think one thing the MBA teaches you to do well is that deal with uncertainty. That
Right.
is one skill that I learned, and I was very like absolutely not equipped to do that. So if I can learn that, I feel that MBA has a lot to offer. So yeah,
Absolutely.
like don't think about what will happen in the future. Think if this makes sense for you right now, and if you have enough courage and strength and will to make it work despite all oddities that you might encounter, then yeah, go ahead for it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. That was very insightful. I think we got a bit too serious towards the end of this, but really, really love this conversation. Let's open the floor for some questions. Feel free to, all the viewers, please feel free to sort of share your questions in the chat box. I do see some questions already here. We'll take them. We have, I think, 10 more minutes available. So we'll take those questions and then we can sort of, before we can answer those questions with these three lovely ladies. And I just a quick tip: if you are asking a question, try to make it generic so that more people benefit from it instead of keeping it very, very personal in nature, because we would not know your personal stories, we would not know your personal situations, so that will make it difficult for us to be able to answer that. I see a question from Vaibhav. Uh, any mistakes that you guys did in your applications and you would want others to avoid? So, Anjika, you are not equipped to answer this question because you did not sort of get any rejections at all. But for Disha and Kashish, I guess I'll leave this to you. What do you think? Did you make any mistakes in your applications that you would suggest others to avoid?
Kashish, you want to go first?
Okay, I'll be honest. I thought all my applications were great. So if there is something that did
Okay.
not work
Yes.
out, I think it's purely because of competition. Because there are so many people fighting for limited spots, right? But in terms of my I know that if I wasn't satisfied with my applications, I wouldn't put them in. So I was very satisfied with my applications. One thing that I could have done definitely differently was I think I applied to all very ambitious schools in R1, which did not leave me for a lot of patience or just energy to even try for any other options, because I was like, I'm done now for this. So maybe I could have had some like safer schools or like some other schools
Hmm.
and maybe have my own sort of opinion on it rather than just being like, okay, no, let's try for all the best schools and let's see what happens. Maybe I could have
Good.
just structured it differently. Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Sounds good. Disha, anything that you would want to add?
Just one thing. It is testament to the fact that you help create really good applications. Hence, this is the answer across the board. But I will say, of my 5 applications, I had interview invites from 4. And I really thought about that one school. And I just realized that it wasn't that my application was bad, it's just that the school was not the right fit for me. And
Mhm.
in terms of the type of applicants that they historically accept, versus my profile. And I think it was an outlier in the schools that I chose. So that's probably one mistake that can be corrected.
Right. So make sure that you choose your schools which align with what you bring or what you have, which aligns with your profile or your expectations. Right. Makes a lot of sense. Uh, let's go to the second question. Okay, Anjika, sorry for that, but anything that you would want to add in terms of
Uh,
mistakes to avoid?
I mean, this is something I thought a lot about, but I didn't kind of put it on my application. But I'll bring it out for somebody who can benefit from it. So I thought, like social impact was extremely important as a skill set to have. Somehow, when I had this myth when I was going into my application phase, and I had like bits and parts of it, but it wasn't something that I'd done for 4 years consistently. But like luckily I spoke to you and you broke that myth that it's not about like the duration. It's more about the depth of the work that you've done and why is it so important for you. So I mean, for future applicants, I think that's one suggestion, because very till the very like first day of my call, I was like, no, social, I need to have social impact as an important thing on my table, and it has to have 3 or 4 years of experience at least. But when you go into the process and you try to combine the bits and parts from your experience and actually tell them the rationale that why is that so important to you, I think that has more weightage as opposed to just trying to build something for the sake of it.
Right. Just to give the context, guys, Anjika applied to 6 schools. She received admits from 5 schools and a waitlist from the 6th school, which did not really matter because she already had Wharton by that time. But that's the reason why we said, we don't really want to hear about mistakes from Anjika because she did not make any.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I still
But
cried about the waitlist, bro. Because that was the first international school that sent me the result, and it was a waitlist, and I thought the journey is going to be downhill from there. So it was pleasantly surprised.
Right. Perfect. Thank you so much for this. We have another question from Parika. Should self-reflection and post-MBA career goal setting, okay, so goal setting and self-reflection, should they come before researching the schools or should they come after researching the schools? That's an interesting question. So should you know your goals and yourself before you start researching about schools or after? What would you
Before,
say?
for sure. I think it should happen before because you're less likely to get influenced by the, I don't know, like
Marketing.
the yeah, or like the repertoire that a school offers. If you already know the kind of person you are and what you're looking for, you're
Right.
less likely to be influenced by it, I guess.
Right. Anything that you guys would want to add, Anjika, Disha?
Yeah, just one quick thing would be like just to echo Kash's point, definitely before. And the reason I say that is because then you will not be able to know what geography to research for, what kind of programs, what are you looking to gain. Because the research can be, even for the schools that you end up shortlisting, is already very, very extensive. So if you don't do that reflection early on, then you're literally sitting on a school list of 100 different schools and you don't know what you're looking to gain when you're looking at that particular website, right? Like, or you're speaking to somebody else. So I think just even narrowing down your research also requires a lot of reflection to know, does ranking matter to you? Does post MBA outcomes in a particular industry matter to you more? Does the collaborative versus competitive mindset matter to you more? So I think having that clarity, you will look for those things when you're doing your research and have a more targeted approach. So definitely echo that, do it at least
Right.
majority of it before, and then learn through the journey as well, and then try and adapt. So if you learn something and if there is certain level of research that shows you something and allows you to reflect during the journey, then definitely do that as well, but have a strategy going in.
Right. Makes a lot of sense. Anything that you wanted to add, Disha?
Yeah, echo both of these sentiments, and just that it becomes so much easier to narrow schools down. Like you don't have to go through 100. If you already know that, oh, I want to do tech and I want to be in the West Coast, yeah, the rest of the country, the US doesn't matter. So you're down to like 4 or 5 schools you want to pick out from, and it makes your job a lot easier as well.
Right. Makes perfect sense. Another question that we have is, okay. So it's a specific question towards Kashish. I have currently 3 years of work experience and I'm looking to apply for US MBA programs. But how did Kashish convince the adcoms that she would be the right fit despite having less experience? I think we have touched upon this in the earlier part of the video, but maybe you could just provide a very executive summary of your answer.
Yeah, I think I focused more on the leadership trajectory that I had in those 3.5 years rather than saying, oh, I only have 3 years of experience. Also, the quality of your experience really matters. So if you can sort of really show the quality and the impact that you've made in the limited number of years that you have, and not just in your professional life, but like in other aspects of your application as well, I think it should help you to like mitigate the disadvantage of that a little.
Right. And I think one of the things that you guys mentioned earlier was also about knowing the strength that you bring, right? So within those 3 years, whatever work you've done, be very open about sharing the strengths that you've built and the impact that you've created, the accomplishments that you have had, because all of this will factor in when they're evaluating the quality of the experience that you've had, rather than just the number. The number does not, obviously it matters, but it's not the make or break aspect of it. It will, as Kashish said earlier, it is going to be about the quality that you bring in rather than just the number. So thank you for that. any other questions before we close? Because I think we are dot on 1 hour. So I think this has been a great session. Thank you everyone for watching. Thank you, Kashish, Disha, and Anjika for joining us. This has been a great session. It was very fun connecting again with you after quite a while. And I've loved this conversation. I wish you the best for all your journeys, and I wish all our viewers to sort of for the best for their MBA applications. I hope you've learned something from this session that was not available before. And I wish you the best. Have a very nice evening, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for making us a part of it.